concert.
Dance party afterwards.
Yeah.
All right, it's 8:30. I'm going to call the meeting, the public safety, what month is this? September? September's public safety meeting to order. I'm going to do a roll call. So, Mr. Buckholz,
Present.
Ms. Dennis,
Here.
Mr. Schluter,
Here.
Mr. Van Etten.
Here.
All right. Madam Clerk, are we in compliance with open meetings laws?
Yes.
The agenda has been presented. Is there any questions on the agenda? Hearing none, moving on to public comment. Is there anybody present or virtual that has, that's not on the agenda that would like to address the committee at this time? Bear with us as we work through the electronic components here. I don't see anybody raising their hands. There's nobody present that wants to address the agenda. All right, moving on. Minutes from the August meeting. Has the committee had a chance to receive a copy of the minutes?
Yes. I make a motion to approve as presented, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion from Mr. Buckholz to approve the minutes as presented. Ms. Dennis?
I'll second it.
I have a second from Ms. Dennis. In discussion, is there any questions on the minutes? Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor of approving the motion, approving the minutes, indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, next we have a proclamation that that this committee reviewed last month. It's now up again for discussion and possible action. Is there any comment on the proclamation? Do we need it read for the record, or?
I think everybody should have been able to read it, Mr. Chair. I think we need to read it.
If there's no comments, I make a motion to approve.
And so with your motion to approve, what is it that we want to do with this? Send it up to the full county board?
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. I have a motion for Ms. Dennis.
I will second that motion.
I have a second for Mr. Buckholz. In discussion, is there any questions, any comments about the proclamation? Hearing none, call for a vote on the motion. All in favor of forwarding this on to the full county board, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Proclamation will be going on to the full county board's September meeting.
Hand it to me, I'll sign it, Mr. Chair.
All right, next is the judge's report. Your Honor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Schlender. I guess the only thing that I have for this month is an issue that I have had with the Wisconsin state court system. It's my understanding that Dane County employees, so if you work in the court system in Dane County, there is an exemption that you don't have to wear a mask if you have a medical condition. Under the Supreme Court order, Sawyer County is in a position where we have to follow the Supreme Court order. And this is going to sound a little bit complicated here, but one of the things that upsets me the most as a lawyer and as a judge is when one of the main tenets of our law, of our constitutional system of government, is equal application of the law. And I got a little definition here that I forwarded on to them to remind them, and that is to be treated equally by the law and courts, both in procedures and in the substance of the law. So what you have here is a system of a patchwork of all these different orders from the different counties and from the state and from the Supreme Court that basically have different applications of public health orders and things like that. And what that comes down to is that in the court system, depending on which county you work in, you are in basically being controlled by different orders, and it's very complex and it's very confusing. And they basically have explained to me that the Dane County order did not exempt the courts, and they view the Dane County health mandate as more restrictive than what the Supreme Court is mandating for the court system in the other counties. And so what you have then is that the Dane County health order allows for people to not wear the mask if they have mental health issues or medical issues. And they are viewing that as a more restrictive plan than the Supreme Court order, which mandates on the all the circuit courts, which basically says that there is no provision. You have to wear the mask. The only person that can't wear the mask is the witness on the witness stand, and then I have to make specific findings on that. I know that's kind of very difficult to follow. I had to read through their explanation several different times. I'm just raising the point, not for this committee to do anything about it, but just to be aware that they're in what we've been going through the last 6 months. Once this is all over with, I would really support the at least just the county bringing this issue up to the state and having our local leaders bring this up to the state, that we have to review and come up with a better system here for the future. I mean, because even though that there's this health crisis here, we can't lose one of our basic tenets, and that's equal application of the law. And we all know that a lot of the orders that have been put out have indicated that if you have a medical condition, a legitimate medical condition, there are exemptions to that order. I think Sawyer County's has that. I know the governor's has that. Dane County's has that. But for some reason, the Supreme Court order on the circuit court system is more restrictive, and I think is unfair, and it's not quite right. The reason I'm bringing this up, because I do have an individual that works in my office under the state court system who does have a medical condition. She's got a doctor's note that indicates that she shouldn't have to wear the mask because of a lung condition. And the state court system has told her, well, the Supreme Court order doesn't make any provisions for you to not wear it. So too bad, so sad. But then other state court individuals are able to not wear it. So it's just, to me, an unequal application of the law, and is unfair and is unjust. And so I just wanted to raise that issue. That's not really a local concern at this point, but I do want everybody to be aware that in these crisis times, it is important to review what different entities are doing and to try and make sure that they're acting equally and with an equal application for everybody. So that's my report.
Mr. Schlier.
Thank you. I really appreciate learning this, because I have had a couple of constituents contact me. Well, they're doing this in Green Bay. Why can't we do this here? Now I have an answer.
Yeah.
But I don't understand.
I barely do either.
I'll tell them to call you.
Okay, sounds good. They'll hear a lot of raised voices and frustration out of me, but if they have any questions, they certainly can. So.
Any other questions for the judge? Mr. Bennett, do you got any questions for the judge?
I do not.
All right, thank you. Thank you, sir. Moving on now to the clerk of courts. Oh, Ms. Dennis, go ahead.
I don't have any questions, but I have a comment, and please don't get angry at me. But your mask isn't doing anything.
I don't think any of these masks really are doing
Well,
much.
these do help more than the one you have. Sorry.
Noted.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Moving on now to clerk of court. We have a report by Madam Clerk. The floor is yours, ma'am.
I did submit my report. We were scheduled for a jury trial September 1st, which would have been our first jury trial since the whole COVID thing. It did not go due to a potential possible COVID exposure. So our next date for jury trial is September 11th. It is up with a visiting judge. This causes a lot of issues with space, because we need to take the assembly room, we need to take the UW Extension conference room, and possibly even open up to the back by the judge's office to allow public access. And when we have visiting judges, the issue is we also have Judge Yackel here with his full calendar. Our problem is trying to track all of these rooms. We're trying to reserve them. And then we have to try to remember, oh, the trial's canceled. Now we gotta cancel that reservation. It's just another reason for a second courtroom. I hope you all will take that into consideration because it's gonna bump you guys from this room for your committee meetings. Because we can't stop people from having their jury trials if they demand a trial. I just want to bring that to your attention. And then the rest is, if you have questions on my report.
Any questions on the report? Mr. Bennett, you got any questions for the clerk or clerk report?
I do not, thank you.
All right, moving on to the budget discussion. Mr. Keefe, Mr. Hoff, floor is yours.
Okay, so we're gonna review all of the budgets for all of the applicable departments today.
Are we doing one at a time or are we doing?
Yeah, I think it's on the agenda to do one at a time with each department.
Yeah, we do it individually, then the people that are in those departments that we after.
So I just want to say, these are still preliminary, they're not final, they're still subject to change. Looking specifically at the clerk of courts, did she leave? Okay. Really, all of these budgets we're going to look at, they're budgeting the same for 2021 as we did for 2020. There's really no changes with the exception of one department we'll talk about. We're just trying to kind of get by, absorb the increases in costs as best we can and see how it fits into the big picture and move forward. I don't think there's any staffing changes to the clerk of courts budget for next year. So I don't know, unless you got questions, it's.
Any questions for Mr. Keefe on the proposed budget for the clerk of court? Hearing none, Mr. Bennett, do you have any questions on the budget for this department?
I do not, thank you.
Moving on to district attorney. Mr. District Attorney, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a whole lot that I have to report. We have the full staff at the moment as far as attorneys is concerned. COVID has had some effect on us. We have issues with victims. We have issues with defendants and did I say witnesses or victims first? But we still have issues with all three, victims, witnesses, and defendants. Getting victims access to the courtroom has been a challenge. We've been trying to use Zoom so that they can appear by either video or simply by phone. We've been doing pretty well at that. The judges have been fairly acceptant of that. So I think that has worked pretty good since March. I'm sure we've missed a couple of victims somewhere, but I'm hoping that that's not true. Some folks will come to the courtroom and they'll wear masks and they'll sit 6 feet apart. And so that works well too. I think it's been going fairly well despite the challenges that we've been facing. I don't know if you have questions about my budget. There isn't a whole lot that's changed. It's basically the same. There's a little bit more because, now having 3 attorneys, there's a little bit extra cost for certain things. So we tried to estimate what those would be without going crazy, of course. I asked Mr. O'Keefe, or Mr. Keefe, excuse me, to help with that as well. And I think that it's pretty straightforward.
Any questions for the district attorney?
I just add, there is an increase in a half-time FTE in this budget.
Right. So basically what I'm seeing from the budget is that this is our first time looking at it. So it's kind of like first views.
Yeah, we're still, we've got all the requests from the departments. We're compiling those. We're still meeting with departments. We'll package it all together and see where we're at in total, but individually for the department budgets, this is kind of the first crack at it for committees looking at the requests from the departments.
Okay, so just want to keep that in mind so that, I'm going to ask for questions, but basically this is our baseline information to look at, comparing, maybe contrasting against last year's budget. And then, Mr. Hoff, we have in the past where the board would set up a separate meeting to discuss the budget. Are we gonna do that again this year?
We have nothing scheduled currently other than looking at the public hearing date, and I think we use that date for further discussion amongst the board once that budget is presented to the board and to the public. And I don't think we have a date for the public hearing at this time.
Okay. All right, moving on. Thank you, Mr. District Attorney. We now have, lost my place here, child support. Child support report has been submitted. Is there any questions regarding the child support report? We have a proclamation for the governor.
On the end of her report.
Someone want to explain to me the purpose of the poem?
It does list Sandy and her years of service.
Oh, so it's not our proclamation. This is a proclamation from the governor.
Yeah.
Just acknowledging the Child Support Awareness Month, which was August 2020. So it's for your information and review.
Okay.
For 25 years.
Congratulations.
Right. Well, Mr. Al, please pass the committee's thanks for her service on this locomotive. Right. So we have the draft budget for child support.
Yeah, it's status quo. There's no changes.
Hearing no more questions for child support, we're going to move on to the sheriff's department.
August has been a busy month. We did have quite a few traffic crashes and some that resulted in fatalities. We had a motorcycle traffic crash in July, and we learned in August that the operator of the motorcycle succumbed to his injuries, which put us at 8. And then we had another traffic fatality involving a semi in Loretta in August here. So that bumped us up to 9 traffic fatalities in Sawyer County. We usually average 2 a year. Pat Sanchez and I will be giving a presentation to the full board on the 17th regarding the events that Sawyer County was involved in on the search with 3-year-old Abby in the town of Winter. And we continue to see a rise in drug use, and we are arresting more people for using and dealing as well because of it. And that's all I have. I'll turn it over to the chief and lieutenants.
Dispatch report, the total number of calls for August of 2020 was down considerably from July, like about 700. Of those 5,008 calls, 1,820 were calls for service. So I guess it's a little better than it was in July. Communication centers in the process of training in a new part-time employee, Danielle Church. So the Hayward Schools is also granted dispatch access to their camera system. So in the event of any type of emergency at the school, the dispatch center will have access to the high school's camera system. We did meet with the Fire Association regarding the Spillman module Rip and Run, and I think we've discussed this before. Rip and Run is an add-on feature to our record management system, which will allow us to email call information or through a phone app, get information to emergency services that's needed to a call. The phone app will even plot the call on the map and everything like that. So it's been interesting. So we met with the ambulance the fire association and the sheriff's department, and we agreed as to who would pay the costs of this for the yearly maintenance fee. The yearly maintenance fee is $2,250, so it would be a good application for us. Dispatch relieves or gets a lot of calls after a call from services asking, you know, what their arrival time was and stuff like that. So this would automatically just push all that information via email or a phone app to them. So we'll probably be moving forward with that Rip and Run module and the Active 911, which is the phone app.
Any questions for the chief deputy? Moving on to the lieutenant.
You see the patrol reports, and protocol reported that we sent deputies to was about 1,159, slightly up from 2019, but it's slightly down from July, where we had 1,178, so I'm hoping that we peaked. A couple other things is Cranberry Fest was canceled. I met with the Cranberry Fest committee. However, we are tasking 2 officers to do roving and mobile patrol in that area, just on the offset that they have an influx of people coming to that area anyway. We're preparing for Trout Fest this weekend, and I've also finalized the 2020-2021 Bureau of Traffic Safety grant for traffic enforcement. We were earmarked for $35,000 again for the coming fiscal year. If we're awarded that, then that'll put obviously federal monies into our coffers for overtime, for traffic enforcement. And my hope is then, as it relates to school bus safety, I'll task officers to handle some of those traffic enforcement issues as well.
Any questions for Lieutenant? Great. All right, Ms. Dennis.
I would just like to say kudos to the sheriff's department for what you're doing with the drug problem here. It's amazing. And I'm sure the rest of us appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I got one question I'd like to throw at him too.
Mr. Buckles.
I would like to thank you guys for your service out there. You guys go out there and do, and your deputies to keep us safe. I really appreciate it.
Means a lot.
Lieutenant.
Well, you can see I have the August jail report up there. I added a year-to-date column for the average daily population, just so the committee can kind of see a running total throughout the year. I will keep that column on there for future meetings. In addition to the report that I submitted, we had our annual jail inspection from the State Department of Corrections this month. That went very well. The inspector was pleased and impressed with everything that she saw. I haven't gotten back the official report from her. She said due to inspection month being very busy in September, it probably won't be until October, but it went very well.
Any questions for our jail lieutenant?
Thanks for the report.
Mr. Bennett, you got any comments for Sheriff's Department?
I do not.
All right, thank you, guys. We have the animal control report. Is there any questions from the committee on that report which was submitted? Other than the fact that we continue to miss Sherry. All right, budget discussion. Everyone has the budget for the Sheriff's Department.
No, can I
We don't?
pass these out? We actually met with the sheriff and chief deputy yesterday to go through and discuss the budget, so I held back putting anything in the packet because I didn't know if something was going to change. So if you don't mind, I'll pass these out.
Sure. You have to get a copy to Mr. Bennett.
Yep. Maybe we can have Carol put it on the internet after the.
We can just scan a copy and email it to him.
You can do that. I don't know, Sheriff, do you want to start with your budget, kind of go through it, or?
Well, and I think the only increase outside of increase in wages and benefits, the only additional thing we requested for the most part, is increased hours for mental health counseling and the medical for the jail with our contracted service. And again, that has not been increased in over 10 years and was structured when our jail population was 60. And last year we averaged 101. We've seen an increase in emergency room visits because the contracted service and what the contract is. I think part of the issue there is they end up having to ship more to the emergency room, which costs us more as well. So I think that may in the end offset some of that, but it's projected speculation too.
So what are we looking at in terms of contrast between last year's budget and this proposed budget?
So if you look at page 13, this pulls in all of the budgets for law enforcement, but on page 13, if you look at the very last number, if you look at the 2020 budget, you see in parentheses, the 5.4 million. That's what the county put towards law enforcement, and this year it's going to almost 5.6 million. So there is an increase in levy needs here for the department. The other area that I think maybe there's an increase that we didn't budget for, I think there's some radios in the budget right now that is an add-on.
Portable radios.
Yeah.
Now, I would just ask the committee to look at this budget and get ready to make sure that we protect this budget as it's been presented, so.
Good. The other thing I will add, just for clarification purposes, in the line items there, when you see the rec officer expense doubled, but we took one of the road deputies out of the road deputy section and moved them to the rec officer position, because we will receive over $20,000 then in revenues from the DNR to support that position. So in the end, it's going to save us 20,000+ by doing that. But by line items, it looks like there's a big increase there, but what it added to the rec officer line item, it took away from the deputy line item.
Dennis?
You were talking about sending them to the emergency room. How do you determine if it's fake? You know what I mean? If it's just a way to get out, or if it's, how do you?
There's a medical protocol that's done if somebody's claiming chest pains or something that would be severe enough that would potentially warrant a doctor visit, and then that decision is ultimately made by the doctor that's with the contracted medical service. They get her on the phone, go through everything in the medical protocol, and then she makes the determination. Unless it's an obvious act of emergency, then staff obviously would send them. But yeah, she ultimately makes that decision on who goes.
Do you get a lot of them that aren't?
Some, I guess I don't have total numbers in front of me.
No,
but
that's fine.
There's some. I mean, I guess we recently had somebody in from a facility on a writ for court, and he has a history of faking seizures, but we have to cover our lots too,
Right.
So some of it's fake, yes. They get bored, they want to get out for a little bit. Obviously they're in custody when they go, but.
Okay,
yeah.
just curious. Thank you.
And it does tie up road deputy staff as well, because they have to accompany them.
Right.
So.
Any other questions for the sheriff, Mr. Hoff?
Just one more comment. The very last page in the packet I handed out is a summary of the capital requests at this time. Again, subject to change a little bit maybe, but you can see what law enforcement is planning for the next year or two.
Yeah, so again, overall in the sheriff's department, they're one of the larger departments here in Sawyer County. We talked about some of the smaller departments earlier, and, the smaller departments are basically made up of, a person or two and some office supplies, that kind of thing. So their budgets, really don't change year to year, other than, the increase in maybe wages or health insurance or those kinds of things. So those budgets are pretty straightforward, which is why we haven't talked too much about those other departments. They pretty much are what they are. The larger departments get a little bit more complicated, of which, the sheriff's department obviously is one of those, highway is one of those, health and human services is one of those. We spend a lot of money providing services in those areas, and those three departments go through a lot of money, but they also provide a lot of services, and they're all made up uniquely, they're different in different ways. Sheriff's department is made up of, personnel, obviously, the deputies providing the service and what they do. So it's very heavy on the personnel side, as opposed to like the highway department, which is very heavy on construction side. So a lot of their costs are construction, and health and human services is made up of a lot of different areas of services that they do. So it gets very complicated. So as we look at these budgets and try to fit all of the services that we're providing within the levy limits that we're operating under here in the state of Wisconsin, that's where the difficulty comes in, is trying to provide these services within those limits. So we've had several conversations with these larger departments. We met with the sheriff's department again yesterday, just trying to rework some of the things in their budget and look at different funding alternatives, ways we're spending money, just to try and maximize the efficiency of those services that we're providing. So we talk a lot about those other funding opportunities that are out there. We're looking at a deep 911 grant for some other equipment there that might be helpful. So those kinds of things are things that help alleviate the tax levy for the services that they provide. But again, when we try and fit everything in there right now, everything is not fitting in there. So that's what me and Mike work on between now and October, November, is rearranging the services. So when you get the full budget for the full county, there probably will be changes to these budgets as we move forward. And then based on these conversations that we're having in each of the committees, as you get in with the full board and talk about the services that we're providing, then you have the opportunity to make any changes that you see fit to provide the services that you want to provide. So, this is one of the more complicated budgets. Sheriff and the staff have been great to work with in working through these issues. But, we're not there yet, so